When I was an undergraduate at Oxford, I hated microbiology. I like big animals, I like trees. The microbes was the stuff I had to drag myself through. And this, when this all changed a good 10 years ago, when I actually suddenly realized, hold on, all these big things I love can only exist with the small things. That was the big eureka moment, right? When I realized, wow, if we start putting the two together, we can really go back to some of these really interesting basic questions and get new insights into what's going on. My name's Tom Gilbert. I'm a professor at the Globe Institute at the University of Copenhagen. I'm also the director of the Center for Evolutionary Hologenomics. And basically what evolutionary hologenomics is studying the relationship between big organisms like us and the small microbes that live on us. And not just what do the two do for each other, but how does the way they work together allow us to look at some of the really basic questions in biology. For example, why do some species go extinct? Why are other species successful? Why do some species get domesticated, and so on. So microbes are tiny, tiny little organisms, mostly bacteria and archaea, but there are other ones as well. They're the kind of things that you have to look down microscopes to see, and they're everywhere. But one of the really interesting observations of the past few decades of biology is how they often play extremely important roles for the larger host that you see around you, and without them you can't exist. So, for example, the nice oak tree behind you right now could not be growing without the thousands or perhaps even millions of different microbes on its roots sitting there helping it, for example, get different nutrients out of the soil and fight off pathogens and so on. Similarly, we wouldn't be sitting here right now without the microbes in our gut, both helping us digest the food we ate for breakfast, but also fighting off other microbes that might be trying to get inside us. So these tiny little things are fundamental to how life works. We understood actually for a long time that hosts and microbes work together, but we just actually couldn't study both parts effectively. So typically, organismal biologists like myself would study the host. We'd study a vulture or a vampire bat or a dog. And typically my colleagues and I would pick a question, for example, why can a vulture eat nasty rotting carcasses and not die? And we would sequence the genome of the vulture and we would look for an explanation. We'd look for maybe genes the vulture has that maybe makes them resistant to the nasty toxins. But actually about 6-7 years ago, a colleague of mine in the US said, have you ever thought about the microbes involved? And he actually was in the remarkable situation to basically kill a load of vultures on the sly and sample the microbes that live on their face and in their gut and so on. And he gave us the samples, and together with a team led by Professor Lars Hesbjerg Hansen, who was at Aarhus at the time, we sequenced the microbes in the process. And when we saw them, we realized that you cannot explain how this vulture fills the niche of eating nasty rotting carrion without factoring in both what the vulture's doing, but also what all the microbes inside it are doing. And this was a sort of like a light bulb moment in my head when I realized, wow, we can actually study both together. And any argument I gave based just on the vulture itself wouldn't be seeing the full story. Because once you realize that microbes do so many functions for the host, they don't just deal with food, they deal with them. They affect behavior, for example, they affect what temperature they can live at. Once you realize that the microbes are basically a phenotype, they're a characteristic of the host. So the holobiont is a term that was proposed about 30 years ago now, and it was simply stating the fact, look, many organisms cannot exist without an association with much smaller organisms. So many big things need to exist with small things. You cannot understand the system without both parts, so let's view the two together as the holobiont. The holobiont is the superstructure, if you will, that is the scaffold of the host and the microbes put together. So one of my pet interests right now, which is admittedly very hard to test, is an observation that we humans have lived alongside canids, dog-like things, for millions of years. And the weird thing is, as far as we know, our ancestors didn't domesticate them, right? We have to zoom all the way forward to 20, 30,000 years ago before humans finally domesticate some kind of wolf to end up with a dog. Dogs are clearly very, very useful, right? They're useful for guarding. You can imagine if you are lying asleep on the savannah and you've got a dog handy and a lion comes, you'll hear about it, right? It's better to find out before the lion gets there. And on the one hand, you could argue it was technological. People had to somehow develop enough thoughts to work out it's a good idea to domesticate them, right? Another idea is maybe actually the wolves domesticated themselves. There is a theory going that maybe we were completely incidental and the wolves were struggling to find things to eat and kind of literally introduced themselves to our lives. But I actually think they could be true, but I think there's a third component, because if you think about what is the biggest challenge to domesticating a wolf, to me the biggest challenge is living with it at the right beginning without it, killing you or killing your children in the night or, being very aggressive. I would not want to sit down next to a wolf or a wolf puppy and, close my eyes, right? And really what I think maybe happened was maybe the microbes are the solution. So microbes, they are little tiny factories that produce drugs. That's all microbes do. They take in chemicals, they pump out chemicals, right? Microbes are known to affect the brain and behavior, right? There's a lot of evidence that even things like depression in humans or anxiety can be driven by microbes. So my pet theory is that what happened was we maybe found some wolf puppies, they're undoubtedly cute. Maybe you kill a mother wolf, you get these wolf puppies. And by bringing them into your life, they get exposed to human microbes that actually get inside them, grow, produce drugs, essentially drug their brain, change their behavior. And you've now got a drugged wolf. That's a very easy thing to live alongside, right? Once you've got a drugged, stable wolf, no different to giving a kid pills against ADHD, you can then spend, generations selecting on it to eventually you've got a wolf that doesn't need the microbes anymore. I would argue that this approach allows you to propose alternate hypotheses for evolution. So to give you a good example, a classic answer to the question, why did the dinosaurs go extinct and why did the mammals and birds survive, right? So 66 million years ago, a gigantic meteor hits the Earth. The dinosaurs die out, but the birds and mammals somehow survive, right? And this opens a fundamental question. Why did the mammals and the birds win the race? Why did the dinosaurs not survive? They were all hit by this gigantic meteor. And there are classic explanations that could say, well, maybe the mammals and birds were more adapted to colder temperatures or the night, or maybe they were omnivorous and could eat more things. But I actually would suggest maybe hologenomics gives another solution. Maybe the real solution was the microbes in them. Maybe when you have a really radical change of environment caused by the meteor impact, maybe suddenly the food supply is very, very different, right? The conditions they have to live in are very, very different. And the microbes inside an organism can actually help you adapt to different situations. So if before the event the birds and the mammals had microbes that would just allow them to be more adaptable, that would give them the boost they need to survive after the impact. And if the dinosaurs were stuck with a sort of very constrained microbial community that couldn't change, they would lose out in the race. The old friends hypothesis is an idea that's been around for a number of years now, especially in the area of evolutionary medicine. And it's basically used to explain why do we humans seem to have so many problems today that we didn't used to have, or at least don't have records of. For example, allergy. Why do so many people have hay fever these days, or dog or cat allergies? And the idea is actually it's to do with our immune system getting bored, basically. If you think about the past, before we were in this uber-sterile modern era, we lived in dirty houses and had our animals living with us and didn't wash our hands very often and didn't use hand sanitizer and, probably had poo on our hands when we were making food. Our body was constantly exposed to microbes. Our immune system was very, very busy with the microbes. They were kind of in this nice, stable relationship to each other, the immune system keeping it down. Now, the problem is, once we live in the uber-sterile modern world, you've taken the microbes out of the equation, your immune system sits around basically with nothing to do. And this is a problem. It starts reacting to things that it shouldn't react to, whether it's autoimmunity reacting to yourself, or whether it's pollen, for example, that it normally wouldn't be a problem, but it's kind of, again, to use a good analogy, it's like a dog left at home. Dogs left at home get up to all sorts of naughty trouble because they've got nothing to do. The idea is your immune system gets up to all sorts of trouble reacting with things that it shouldn't react. And, to be honest, I realize we're in this obsessed let's use hand sanitizer era now in COVID, but this worries the hell out of me because the more we're hand sanitizing, the even less we're being exposed to these things. And I think we're going to, yes, we might fix COVID, but we might be driving allergies and autoimmune diseases way, way, way off the radar, right? Because we're getting less and less exposure to microbes. Of course, I'm not saying we should stop using these kind of things, but this is the problem. Your body has evolved to live in a situation where it's constantly exposed to microbes. If you take one part of the equation out of that, your body's sitting there primed to do something, right? It's full of nervous immune system energy and it starts to cause problems.